Commission meeting of February 21st, 2023. On our agenda tonight, we've got 3 items outside of the administrative items: 265 Foster, 166 Mill, and notice of intent amendment for the benthic mats. First, we're going to start out with the administrative discussion. And Amy, I'm going to give that to you to run through the administrative items at least until 7:45.
Okay, let's see what we can do. The request for certificate of compliance for 6 Field Lane. This is one of the ones I'm kind of trying to clean up since the Fields did not do it before they sold the property. And I went out there and they haven't done anything. The house is built the way it's supposed to be built. No new decks or anything like that. And the conservation signs are up. So I believe it is ready for a certificate.
Are there any questions about 6 Field Lane? If not, then I think we can potentially entertain a motion to issue a certificate of compliance.
I'll make a motion that we issue a certificate of compliance for 6 Field Lane.
I'll second that. Andrew, you want to take us through the roll call vote?
Certainly. All right. All those in favor? Carl? Good evening, Carl.
Well, it was a challenge tonight. Sorry. not having the link is difficult. Anyway. Yeah. Kyle, Melbourne guy.
What am I doing today?
Kyle.
Kyle Maxfield, aye.
Chase?
Chase Garibay guy.
And myself, aye. It is unanimous.
Very good.
And actually, I don't know if you want to back up to the minutes, if anybody had a chance to even look at those.
I had a quick chance to take a look at those. Amy, there were, I can send them to you, just a couple of editorial comments on spelling and things like that, but no content issues.
Yeah, I didn't see any content issues when I went through it either.
So on content, there's been some discussions about what the minutes are supposed to have. And I was told they were supposed to have anything that was used in the meeting actually attached to the minutes, which you will see.
Okay, so we'll see it that way going forward.
No, you will not, because I actually sat down with the open meeting law this morning and I said, no, you don't. You have to list out what it is. So you will see a list at the bottom from now on of what was used, but I'm not going to be physically attaching them.
Okay.
Yeah, because that would be a huge lift, right? I mean, you're going to end up attaching 100-page reports and things like that. That would
it's only what would be used. So if the applicant only showed sheet C100, only sheet C100 would be showed. It wouldn't be everything else. But yeah, it would still be a huge lift. The planning board's doing that. I was like, fortunately, no. So
okay,
sounds good.
So sounds like we're ready then to entertain a motion regarding the minutes of February 7th.
Sure, I'll make a motion that we approve the meeting minutes from our February 7th, 2023 meeting pending editorial edits.
I'll second that.
All right. All those in favor? Carl?
Kyle, Melbourne guy.
Kyle?
Kyle Maxfield, aye.
Chase?
Chase Garibay guy.
And myself, aye. It is unanimous.
all right, so I'll just keep moving along.
Yeah, that sounds good.
So the shoreline permitting issues, including docks, beach nourishment, and Chapter 91 questions. The Chapter 91 folks are willing to give us a informational session training sort of thing on, if it works, March 21st at 6:30. So that would be right before our 7:30. But I did want to make sure that we would have a good showing for that if folks can make that. And the woman, the circuit rider from DEP Wetlands would be there as well, which would be great to have them both there at the same time. So will that work for at least the four of you?
Yeah, before the meeting. That's
Works for me. Andrew, good with you?
Yeah, that should work.
Okay. And
I'm
Carl?
creating a pizza, but that's not going to work.
Ooh, pizza.
Amy,
I'm not sent to your house.
I'm not sure, even though it's a training, or because it's a training and things like that, I'm not sure we technically would need to post it, but as long as everyone's good with it, I'd like to post it, but let's post it as a separate meeting, separate link, And I would recommend for the sake of expediency, I'd like to post it and note that we're not going to be taking public comments. And it's, for informational purposes, and just sort of leave it at that. I don't want to, even if the open meeting law were potentially to allow us to do it without posting the meeting, I'd rather post it. But I also want to make it clear that it's really for the Conservation Commissioner's edification, not as a public meeting for feedback. The rest of the commissioner, are you guys okay with that sort of middle ground there?
Yeah, absolutely.
Sure.
I think that's fair.
And I will also say, I believe Chapter 91 folks will be hosting it. So they'll be setting up the Zoom or Microsoft Office or whatever it is. But yeah, I will get the information from them and post it and get it to everybody, get it to y'all.
Perfect.
With one question on that, Amy, do you need anything from us, anything additional from us on questions for that meeting? I know you had circulated a draft of questions. I'm going to guess you probably didn't get a ton of feedback on that.
I didn't get any feedback on that, which is why I at least gave you questions.
Because there were really good questions.
Yeah, I mean,
If any, it's like, what the heck? So if you have anything specific that wasn't on there you want to ask, and you can let me know ahead of time, that would be great. Otherwise, I think we got enough to get moving. She's been through this before with several towns, so as it turns out. The wetland fee review and the RDAs and waivers, I guess maybe we can just kick that down the road almost permanently until I can find out if DEP is changing their fees.
Yeah, and actually that might not be a bad question for the circuit rider. She may know more than the rest of us. But yeah, I like the idea.
That's not down. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Cause it was just a rumor I heard from somebody, like maybe this fall or something. So I'll just put it on the later in the summer discussion at this point.
Would you want to let Anthony know that we're at least contemplating that so he can let the select board know that it's in the ether? I know they don't like surprises when fees jump.
Yep, no, that's a good idea. On the minor projects approval, did you want to get into this now? Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah, let's go ahead and get into it. If we're running a couple minutes late for the 7:45, we'll so be it.
Let me see if I can make this work. My screen's so small, I can't find it. Nope.
You don't have to run fast. You have to go. If you don't, you're gonna run to the spot.
Try it one more time. Any chance you can see that?
Yep. You can see it.
Thank you.
All right, well, it's on the wrong screen, but there it is. So my main question here, and this is obviously several years old, and was about the fence construction that doesn't create a barrier to wildlife. And the way this is written is that could be at 0 feet from the wetland, and I could technically approve it. For instance, it was just a lawn and it's got room for wildlife passage. It doesn't come up too often. I think the only other time it did was for a dog kennel, and I said they should probably file something. But I don't know if, like the other things on this, you would want to make that maybe if it's 50 to 100, I could approve it if it's, not a barrier to wildlife, but if it's 0 to 50, maybe make more sense to come through to you guys as a RDA, if you're going to accept RDAs in the 0 to 50.
Kyle, Carl, Andrew, do you guys have thoughts on this?
That sounds reasonable.
Yeah, I guess I could agree to that too.
It's up to God. It doesn't happen too often, like I said, so you might see a little more filings, but it's not going to add a lot to your load.
Do you need this, Amy, in terms of additional support from the Conservation Commission when dealing with property owners? Are you, I guess my 2 cents is, I trust your judgment here, and you've always been very, very clear about, no, this is a less obvious thing. I want to bring this to everyone. You know, this doesn't tie your hands and say you have to approve it. It just gives you the leeway to do so if in your opinion. So I guess my question, going back to my question, are you looking for a more firm statement from us because it will help you in terms of dealing with individual property owners, or are you concerned about getting out too far in front of what we're looking for? What's the
I just wanted to make sure you knew that I can approve these things basically without it coming to you. So close to the wetland.
Yeah, I think Chasey, couldn't find the words, but I think you're right with Amy. She would err on the side of the caution, or she always has. If they have them come in front of us for at least an RDA, it sounds like that would still stay true. I guess we have to figure out our RDA when and where policy, but
yeah,
I definitely think this is a good idea to be able to give Amy this authority, inside of these areas, and then but still having the leeway where if somebody comes in with something that off the wall that she's like, wait a minute, that I did not think of that when I wrote this, right?
Yeah, so, which is the phrasing is down there a little bit. That this is, I'm not beholden to this. If I'm not sure, I can still come to you, either make them file or ask you informally for a question. All right, I just wanted to make sure.
If that sounds great.
Yeah. Okay, then I'll make no change to that other than conservation agents of coordinator, but good.
It is 7:46. So what we're going to do is suspend the rest of the administrative discussion in the following items, and we'll open up the 7:45 public hearing notice of intent for 265 Foster Street, Mass DEP 20409. We got the DEP number earlier today, right?
980, I think. Pat, did you get that?
980? That sounds right.
Yeah.
Is there someone here to speak to the 265 Foster Street project?
Yes, my name's Pat Conley. I work with Beals Associates. I'm here representing GID Industrial Advisors, and Rich Sullivan is also joining. He works with GID.
Very good. Pat, would you mind to give us a quick rundown of, we've got the filing, we got the documents, but give us a quick rundown of what you and your client are looking for here, and then we'll probably engage in a discussion following that, what we're looking at. Feel free to share your screen if that's helpful to you.
Sure. Yeah. I put together a brief presentation just to provide an overview, and if there's too much detail and you have questions, feel free to interrupt, and we can just jump to that instead.
That's perfect. Go ahead.
Okay. So the commission may be aware of the property or familiar with the property. We worked with the previous landowners to close out an order of conditions to get a certificate of compliance. I think it was last fall. And now we're working with the new owners, GID Industrial Advisors. So this is 265 Foster Street. In the context, so you have Route 2 on one side, you have 495 on one side, you have the MBTA station to the east, and then Foster Street is to the south. And then this is just a zoomed in view with it rotated. So you have 495, Route 2, Foster Street, and then the railroad station is to the north. And so this is the existing warehouse buildings in the front of the property. Parking and loading is on the bottom side in this view. And then in the back is a gravel storage area. The previous owner, it was a stone yard. So that's where they had a lot of their pieces of stone sitting out there. So this notice of intent is a proposal to pave the gravel area in back of the building. And that's our main focus. We're not extending outside of the extents of the gravel area. We're not cutting down any trees or anything like that. So it's really just focused on that back half. So this is the proposed site plan. The building is on the right side here with the parking. There are some wetland fingers kind of on the bottom view here. There's a detention basin that was previously flagged as a wetland. So for consistency's sake, we flagged that again. And so the gray area here are the extents of the proposed paving. Let me get the laser pointer here. So this dashed line that comes around like this is the current extents of the gravel. And then the solid line and the gray hatching is the proposed pavement. So we stay within the disturbance area. There's a stormwater swale up between today's gravel area and the railroad tracks. We do some modifications to that. We do some planting for stormwater management. And then we're proposing a new swale on the bottom side here, also with some new grading and some new plantings. Another change is removing some existing pavement in this corner right here. When we talked with Amy before, she flagged that 50-foot no disturb really is kind of a hard line. So out of respect for that, we think we can take out this corner here and still have adequate room for trucks to maneuver, to come and back and maneuver around.
So Pat, as a point of clarification, so would the removal of that paving that you just highlighted be part of this project?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
One thing I want to set aside and we might need to talk about is whether, because that is still work within the 50, and I think work that I just want to be clear, it's not a non-starter in our mind, but we might need to talk about making sure that there's a waiver for that to acknowledge the work within the 50.
Okay.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but go ahead.
No problem. That's helpful to know. Okay, so this is just a slightly zoomed in version. So this is the corner right here that we're proposing to remove. We have some more loam and seeding. This dot hatching. We have the pavement area. We flagged up here is the proposed snow storage area, so keep it away from the wetland resource areas. And then this is the new bioswale with the plantings, and then the existing one that will be modified. This is the grading and drainage plan from the plan set, just to give you a sense of, we're trying to match existing grades today, really trying to minimize the site work. So it's just some fine grading and then pavement over it. The basins are a couple feet below, and then it comes up to a berm. And then there's a gravel spillway. Maybe I can zoom in. So this is a proposed riprap spillway, so that if water fills up the basin, it can overflow here and towards the wetland area. And this is there's 2 existing monitoring wells out there. So there's one right here, and the other is in this corner down below here, an existing paved area. There's some, again, from the plan set, proposed landscaping for the swales. We're proposing some dogwoods, black bent, and big blue stem. And then just, we like to just run through how we believe the project complies with the 8 interests of the Wetlands Protection Act. So there's no public or private water supplies on site. And our proposed design meets all the Mass stormwater standards. We have a full erosion sedimentation control plan that was included in the NOI, as well as an operations and maintenance plan. And we will have to get a construction general permit from the EPA, since we'll be disturbing more than an acre of land. We protect the groundwater supply through the design, low impact development techniques, stormwater BMPs, and that operations plan. And like most projects, at a minimum, the annual recharge for post-development will approximate the pre-development recharge. Flood control is, the site's not within a floodplain, but We know storm events happen, and this design does not create any additional restrictions or flooding that would make that worse. Storm damage prevention's, kind of similar. The rates of stormwater runoff are maintained or will decrease, so that'll reduce the chance of damages. And then I'll skip to prevention of pollution. We have that construction general permit, storm activities. We'll have a full SWIP plan prepared prior to construction, and our firm can perform the SWIP inspections throughout construction. There's no land containing shellfish, no land containing fisheries, and there was no flagged estimated priority habitat in this area. And then lastly, I'll just wrap up with, we looked at the local bylaw performance standards. We meet the 3 performance standards for work within the buffer zones. We consider the existing conditions. Like I said, we're trying to do the minimum amount of work and really just kind of pave the existing disturbed area and control stormwater management. There's, because of the water resource protection district, the zoning district restricts what can go on in this overlay. We're not applying any fertilizers or anything like that would be of concern.
Can I push on that a little bit for a second? When you say we won't be applying any that will be of concern, does that mean you will be applying some, but you don't think they're of concern, or you won't be applying any?
We won't be applying it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
does that include the area that's going to be where the pavement is going to be removed and revegetated? You don't anticipate needing any fertilizer there to get the grass growing? You're not going to hydroseed it with a fertilizer mix in it or anything?
No, that I believe that we just do loam and seed, no fertilizers or chemicals that may go into the groundwater. And that's that. So I can flip back to any slide if anyone has questions, or I'm available. Thank you.
Okay. Andrew, Carl, Kyle, do you guys have questions that you want to go through here?
So the existing building will remain as is?
Yes, no changes to the building, no changes to the parking areas, the loading areas, access, anything like that. It's just, and even this line here is to below this white area is existing pavement that stays the same. It's really just this area shaded in gray that is currently gravel and is proposed to be paved.
And what is going to be the use of the building?
So GID doesn't have a tenant lined up yet, but it's a warehouse use. They're trying to cast a wide net. It's a changing market. So one of the reasons why they would like to pave this is, it widens the potential tenant. Whether it's outdoor storage or I don't think there's any concerns about parking. But yeah, a wide range of warehouse uses.
Do we know if there'll be trucks parked in that new parking area? Or like long-term or storage?
Yeah, there hasn't been talk of that. We've talked about trailer storage, and that's part of the reason why it's kind of a rectangular design, because you can park trailers if that's the tenant that comes along. I should mention we're also submitted a site plan review and special permit in front of the planning board, so we'll have to go through that process as well, and in that water protection district that I mentioned earlier.
Pat, do you envision any on-site fuel storage? One of my concerns with paving all of this is that it's going to expedite runoff if there's a release from a vehicle, from an above-ground storage tank, anything like that. Do you have any sense of what this is going to look like outside of the 100-foot buffer, but within the total project scope?
Yeah, again, they haven't really nailed that down. I know the reason why I mentioned the planning board, and that is there's the Water Resource Protection District has limitations on, chemicals and fuel storage in vehicles and all that. So we'll have to comply with that anyways. But in terms of like a specific tenant, it really, like, I guess they're trying to keep their options open and, are well aware of the wetland resource areas and the sensitivity of this site. So I think that they would take all the precautions that they would need to ensure there wasn't a spill.
How would we know that they're taking the necessary precautions?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know if that would be a condition on either the order or with the planning board. Yeah.
I would assume at the least there would be a condition in perpetuity that the stormwater facilities have to be maintained as their proposed function.
That makes sense.
Can I get into a sort of nitty gritty point, Pat? Can you go to one of the figures that showed the spillway? You've got armoring for a spillway there.
Yep.
Yeah. There we go. What design storm, and maybe this was in the report, and I'm sure it was in the report, and I'm sure I just missed it. But what design storm is the retention swale intended to capture versus release through the spillway? Where's that boundary? A 2-year storm, 10-year, 25?
That is a great question. I don't have that answer off the top of my head. To be honest, our files went down this afternoon around 4:00. So Rich and I had a last minute scramble to get this presentation in my hands. I can definitely follow up through Amy with that answer.
I guess one of the things that as I look at this, one of my concerns, and I don't know if it needs to be addressed or not, is we've got a spillway, and that's fine, but there's essentially no armoring outside of that spillway. And one of my challenges to you is, do we need to armor outside of that spillway to make sure that in the design storm that will exceed the capacity of the retention swale, we're not significantly incising the sort of southwestern portion of that slope down into the wetland?
Okay. Yeah, I know what you mean.
And I'm open to the answer is no, but it's a question that I would like you to take a look at and, give some thought to.
Sure.
I had a couple other questions, but I'll hold them until Kyle, Andrew, or Carl, if you guys have anything else.
Sure. I have a quick question on, I guess, the sequence of the work. I was looking through the figures, and I think there's a cross section of the proposed pavement. You're talking large vehicles, trucks, trailers. So I understand the cross section, but I think it was 20 inches of imported. So a sub base, compacted gravel, whatever, up to a few inches of asphalt. Can you? I guess my question: Are you going to be removing 2 feet of material here to match grades?
No,
so you can import 2 feet.
No, I believe it's just fine grading and working with what's out there.
Okay. Yeah, because the detail definitely is talking about processed material and a dense graded stone underlying, because there's going to be, it looks like a geo grid of some sort going in as well. So just getting a little wary that you're going to be cutting down 2 feet to bring this back up. Which,
right. No, yeah, that's not the intent.
Okay.
I give you a couple other questions here, Pat. Can you talk to me about other utilities here, particularly electrical lines and lighting associated with this?
Yeah, so the simple answer is there's no proposed change. We're not touching any of the existing lighting. I think let's see. Zoom in. Let's utilities on this one. Yeah, so we have there's a gas line here. But basically all the utilities are the existing building, the existing parking lot goes to the building, and that all remains the same, and the remainder of the project is really just site work and pavement and grading.
Okay. So you're not proposing to add any additional lighting in the parking area? The reason I ask that is sometimes we look at lighting as an impact to the resource area, even otherwise altering the hydrology.
Yeah, that's correct though. We're not proposing any changes.
Okay. Last question for you here is that you're proposing, so there's a swale to the east, to the top of the page, and then there's a swale to the west, the bottom of the page. How much flow is directed to one versus the other in the current conditions versus the post-construction conditions? And what I'm really looking for here is to understand whether or not we're going to deprive the wetland resource area of necessary water, particularly to the west.
Yeah. So the answer is we're trying to match it as close as possible.
Okay.
Just to clarify, this dash line is the existing topographic line, and then the solid line are the proposed. So we really are trying to match them as they are. Generally this is the higher, and then water will slope down to the wetland, but that's as it exists today. There's a slight change here where this contour comes down as opposed to a little further to the right existing today, but for the most part, we really try to minimize the impacts pre and post project.
Okay, and so you're not just talking about net impacts, but you're talking about even impacts to one basin versus the other.
Right. Yeah, we're trying to keep it the same today.
I have a question. Where is the existing septic system for the current building?
I believe it's out front. So I believe it's in this grass area. And then our proposed work is on the other side of the site.
Okay.
So Carl, Andrew, and Kyle, one step here. I mean, I flipped through the drainage calculations, but certainly didn't do much more than that. My preference would be to have those go through a peer review process just to validate Beal's conclusions. Do you guys have any opposition to making sure that those get a peer review, or would you like to go forward without a peer review?
That sounds great.
Yeah, I agree.
I agree as well.
So Amy, do you know if the planning board is going to have Green take a look at this? I assume it's Green or whoever, someone, third-party review of the stormwater, or is that going to be solely something driven by us?
Yeah, and Pat, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm pretty sure Lauren's on vacation now. That the planning board will be arranging that.
Yes, we received something from Jim Thorne, I believe yesterday, for their peer review.
And I'll also send over to Green some of the questions that came up tonight, so they can see where the commission's thinking.
Okay, that'd be helpful. So, Pat, I think my sense here is that we won't act on this until we see the results of the peer review. Not that we have any indication that anything's wrong, but we want to make sure to dot the I's and cross the T's here. So that we're set up the next time that you and your client come in to discuss this. The last thing I'd like to discuss is whether or not the commission thinks that we need a site walk to take a look at the property. I know some folks have seen it associated with the previous filing. question to the commission. Do you guys want a site walk here, or are you good without a site walk?
I think it would be helpful. I think we looked at this last fall, and there was a lot of material and other things all over the place the last time we went out there, and it might be helpful to look at the existing conditions.
Okay, that's enough for me. One yes is certainly good enough. So Pat, the question then is timing and availability for a site walk. Typically how we like to do this is maybe give you a time that we would like to set one up, and as long as it works for you, we'll go ahead with that. Unfortunately, without the benefit of 3 of our commissioners tonight, we're running at a thin margin. What I would like to do is take essentially a straw poll of this group, but still run it through the other commissioners before we set aside a time. So looking at a calendar, I know we're going to get some snow this week, so that may not be a great time for a site walk. Potentially the
And
end
Chase,
of the-
actually, can I also double check, Pat, are you guys on for the planning boards at the March 9th? Is that their next meeting?
Yes, we're on for the 9th.
So I don't know if you all want to come back March 7th or the 21st, which might factor into this a little bit.
Sure.
Yeah, it sounds like we could probably decide our day with the rest of the commissioners here, right? If they're
Yeah, Pat, if it's okay with you and your client, I wouldn't mind to defer the rest of this discussion to the 7th, including a timing for a site walk. And then the planning board will still have to take a look at it. I imagine you'll still have a peer review, so hopefully we're not sort of the rate limiting step here. Does that work for you guys? Come back on the 7th, sort out a site walk, and then probably take it up again, presumably on the 21st of March?
Yeah, I
Sounds
think
good.
that timeline makes sense.
And there may or may not be, there could be preliminary comments from Green by the 7th. I wouldn't, hold my breath, but
Chase, can you just go back real quick to your thought on the waiver?
That was the last thing. So I guess I wanted to understand what the commission thought, given that there is actually proposed work in the no disturb zone, whether or not the applicant needs a waiver associated with this project.
I mean, I think the answer is yes, right? You're working within the 50. I think it's an easy one, right? I mean, you're restoring the area. So but I think we have to follow the process here. Just because we know what's going to happen I don't think means it shouldn't be completed.
Absolutely.
So Pat, that's going to be some homework for you and your client. If you can put that together for the 7th to explain, like Kyle said, it should be fairly straightforward, but explain the work and complete a waiver associated with the removal of the paving in that no disturb zone.
Okay.
And one of the things that I think we'll want to understand there is the access to that area. Presumably you're going to access it within the area that is going to be removed, but we would want to understand that you're not going to access it from a different direction or another access point that would impact the 0 to 50, as well as disposition of materials from there. Not going to be stockpiled in the 0 to 50, or frankly, for that matter, given the space you have, the 50 to 100.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else from the commission here?
I'm all set.
I'm good.
So Pat, we'll see you again on the 7th. We'll plan on addressing some of these questions that we've put forward, and then schedule a site walk on the 7th, and then plan on again taking it up on the 21st following the site walk.
Okay, sounds good.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pat.
Okay, moving on to get back to the agenda here. Moving back on to our 8 p.m. notice of intent 166 Mill Road. We don't currently have a mass DEP file number for this. Is there anyone here to speak to this particular project? Bartlett?
Yes, Bartlett Harvey, speaking for the client. We are making a very big ask of the commission. I started to explain that in my memo to you. That explains the situation. You've seen this site before. We've talked about locating the proposed addition. In terms of my interest as an architect, adding the building, adding the addition off the side of the house into the 50-foot zone makes a lot of sense in terms of the flow in the house. I know that's not your concern, but it is mine and my clients'. The other thing that I really wanted to focus on tonight is if you look at if you have my package in front of you, if you could look at the existing site plan. There's a basement door on that side of the house that has a grade level entrance. And that causes the ground is about 3 feet higher than the grade level there. So that's going to make getting equipment, particularly the concrete trucks, to the back of the site very difficult. We'd have to fill that in order to get a truck past that door and then dig it out again. So what I'm asking, based on that difficulty and because to get it the addition in the back of the house the way we had talked about at one point, we'd have to get the truck all the way back there because just to pour concrete, the chutes are a straight line and would be going back towards the middle of the house. And I just don't see a reasonable way to get a concrete truck back there. So I think our proposal of going off the side of the house reduces the amount of excavation, it reduces the amount of truck traffic and disturbance on the site, and it gives my client the space that he wants. So I'm just asking you to consider what the alternatives are and what difference it really makes in terms of the wetlands, which are they're across from it, what's listed as the tree line. That, going a little bit less than 50 feet. I have 39.9 on there. I just think that's a reasonable proposal for us to make. And I'm asking for a waiver to do that.
And so I'll turn it over to the commission now that the applicants had a chance to lay out the projects. What questions does the commission have associated with this?
First thing that comes to my mind is that there probably are other ways of getting the cement down there. There's cement pump trucks that can get cement there without actually backing the truck down. Building, we take a really strong stance against building in the 50.
I know that.
And we've, we have to be really cognizant of anything that makes a precedent for that within that 50. So just from where I'm coming from, it's a pretty big hurdle to get over.
With that in mind, Barley, could you expand? I mean, the fundamental question in the waiver is how this particular project is in the public interest, necessary to avoid a taking, necessary to prevent a safety hazard, or water dependent. And you gave us some explanation in the waiver. Can you expand on that for us to help us understand the public interest, the safety hazard, the water dependent pieces of this?
Well, I'm just, I'm not really sure that I can make a better case. I think that building in back of the house doesn't satisfy anybody because it's all within the 100-foot, and it doesn't give the client what he wants. I think that the area that we're talking about in both cases is fill on top of whatever natural grades were there before the house was built. We'll be digging into that for the foundation. And I don't think that I think that the building on the side would not make a material difference in terms of erosion or damage to the wetlands that are there. I think that getting a truck back there, yes, I mean, pump trucks are possible and it could be done from the driveway, but that's a huge expense. And I don't think that it's really necessary or that it gets any benefit to the commission.
Carl, did you have any other questions to ask the applicant here?
No, I just, it's gonna be very difficult in my mind to permit this. We've turned down, we've turned down lots and lots and lots of applicants that wanted to do work in the 50, even, cantilevered decks that extend into the 50 we've turned down.
To say nothing of some applicants that we've made remove things that were inadvertently installed.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's
No,
yeah.
okay. I remember that watching a hearing where you turned down an applicant for a cantilevered deck, but that was because the permit had expired. So, I mean, I recognize that this is a big ask, but I actually think it's quite reasonable.
Kyle or Andrew, do you have anything to add here?
I mean, so forgetting all of the discussions of in the 50, outside of the 50, I'm looking at the proposed plan and of the new addition. I think it says 480 square feet. I'm assuming that this is somewhat to scale. That percentage is pretty large compared to the existing building, correct? Do you know what the square footage of the existing impervious is?
Well, the addition is 460 or 480 square feet, something like that.
Okay, so I'm just looking at proposed plans, and can you describe how you're going to manage stormwater coming off of?
Well, there's a roof, there's gutters. I have, I think on the mitigation plan, there's, I have gravel, a gravel trench along the long side with the rain leaders going into that. I have a dry well at the corner of the house for the porch roof. So all the water would be led underground into gravel. So there wouldn't be any, in fact, there wouldn't be any runoff. There would be less runoff because the porch roof is going to catch some of the main house roof.
If there aren't any other current questions about this, so we don't currently have a mass DEP number. I know some folks have seen this in an informal context. So the question in the commission is whether or not it's necessary to, well, I guess two questions. One for Amy in terms of the wetland delineation line and your comfort with that. have you taken a look at this, Amy? Are you good with the wetlands border as it's been flagged?
I haven't seen it flag to flag, although it seemed fairly straightforward. It would be worth at least me taking a visit at it.
Okay. So the second question for the commission is whether or not a site walk would be beneficial here.
You don't have to plan one around me. I was there last year when we walked this informally, so it's pretty fresh in my mind.
I guess in my mind, I don't need to see it in detail. I've seen it from the road and have a general understanding of what's going on and feel okay with it. But Carl or Andrew, do you guys want to see it?
I feel fine from the sidewalk.
I would I would agree. I still remember the site pretty well from our visit last, I believe, March.
And I know Sarah's been out there.
Yeah, so what I would like to do then is table this discussion, Bartlett, until two things occur. One, we have a Mass DEP file number, and two, Amy's had a chance to go out and take a look at the wetlands border. That will have a substantive impact on how much of this proposed project is in or outside of that 50-foot, which is really the threshold issue here. I'm presuming, well, the weather cooperates with us, and sometime in the next 2 weeks, Amy could get out there to take a look at it. And so, Amy, would it be safe to assume that Mass DEP would have a file number for us in a couple of weeks as well?
I can give them a heads up in about a week or
Okay.
around March 1st or so and say our next meeting is March 7th. Can we get a DEP number? Well, they don't have it logged in yet. Although they did log in 265 Foster, which was submitted at the same time. So you might want to check with DEP and make sure they got the filing.
Okay, I did mail it. I did email it. So
Yeah. You might just confirm. Sometimes the holdup is
Okay.
with the check. So
all right.
you just might want to see if there's a reason they haven't logged it in yet. Other than just that they're understaffed.
I was actually shocked that we got a file number for 265 Foster. So
Yeah, who do they know?
So what we're going to do is hopefully in a couple weeks time, Bartlett, we also have a more complete commission to weigh in on this as well.
Okay.
And so I don't think it's in anyone's interest to ask any more questions of you that we might just rehash again in a couple weeks. But we'll have Amy take a look at the wetland border. We'll hopefully have a Mass DEP file number, and we can take it up again on March 7th.
Okay.
Sound good?
Yep.
Yeah. So, Amy, do we need a vote to continue this to March 7th or?
Nope.
Okay. So we'll continue it to March 7th. Then. Okay, next up on the agenda is notice of intent amendment associated with the benthic mats in Lake Mattawanakie, Mass DEP file number 2040962. Dave, I'll turn it over to you in just a quick second. We're a few minutes behind here, so my ask of you is let's get to the point and understand what the question is, and then try and hash it out.
Sure. Yeah, thanks. So earlier we had a meeting in December, November, where we reviewed the experience of the pilot project for the benthic mats on Lake Mattawanakie. And at that time, I told you that most of the participants were interested in see if we could get approval for larger mats to be put down instead of the 600 square foot limit. We took a proposal to Westford requesting 2,000 square foot, and they approved that in December. And I waited to send the proposal to you until we knew what they had approved, so we could all be discussing the same thing. So I think you've got our one-page request that I sent to Amy in December, where we're asking for maximum size of benthic mats to be increased to 2,000 square feet. And if mats smaller than that are used, they could be moved to cover additional square area at the site. But in any case, the total area would not exceed 2,000 square feet. And just there's a last paragraph is just a reminder that from the state's generic environmental impact on eutrophication, the state identifies benthic mats as appropriate for plant management as long as they cover no more than 10% of the lake area. And even if a quarter of the developed lots on the lake were to use 2,000 square foot, that would amount to less than 1%, 2/3%. So this was approved by Westford, and so we are requesting the same thing for from Middleton. The participants, well, most of them felt that 600 was not quite enough to give them the clearance that they were looking for in terms of a swimming area and being able to get their boats in and out without fouling with the weeds. So the feeling was that 2,000 was adequate for that.
Yeah. And you're seeking to
modify the order of conditions that we had before, where it said 600 max, to change it to 2,000 square foot max.
Oh.
And just to kind of also clarify that if smaller mats are used, they could be moved around as long as the total area covered that season was not more than 2,000.
Amy, have you seen the confirmation from Westford that they blessed this and are good with it?
Yeah, I've been back and forth with Matt Salem over there, who's the agent.
Okay. Questions from the commission for the applicant here?
So we're more than potentially tripling the current benthic mat size that we allowed. If I'm reading this correctly?
Right. The 600 originally requested was just kind of our sort of just guess at what would be adequate. And when people actually used it last summer, they found that it wasn't. And there was actually some confusion about what the requirements were, and there were several a couple of participants that three that moved their mats their mats so that they did cover more, so they, from their experience, the 600 square foot wasn't really quite enough. 200 is what, 40 by 50. In some cases, people would like to have space for swimming, and also some people have problems getting their boats in and out with the plants that are there, and have had engines fouled and had to take them out and get them sent to get them cleared out. So they would like to have a separate additional mat that could open a channel coming into their dock to not have to deal with that.
So basically, so the mats basically block the sunlight, so it stops the growth of the plants, correct? Is that
Right.
that's
That's the main thing they do is block the sunlight so the plants don't grow. I think there's also some effect of just sort of physically being on the bottom, but it's mainly the sunlight. There's one of the designs actually has the mat floating up about an inch above the bottom, so it's not actually on the bottom, and that is equally effective at that is effective at stopping the plants growing there. So that basically shows that it's not the fact that it's sitting on the bottom, but blocking the light. And the experience was that when the mats were removed after a month or so, the plants, had there were no plants under it, and then the plants slowly grew back over the course of the summer. After a month, they were a few inches high. After a couple months, they were maybe half a foot high. But so basically by the fall, they were kind of coming back again, but over the course of the summer season, they were initially, gone and then kind of slowly coming back, but at a lower level, so that during the summer, they were not really so much a problem. The mats that had that were burlap sit on the bottom. They're definitely on the bottom, and those had no plants growing on them throughout the season, and they would be left in place for a couple of years. And our understanding is that they would be effective for about 3 or 4 years, maybe 3 years. And so part of the project is to see how long those remain effective.
I'm glad you brought that up, Dave, because that actually feeds into one of my concerns here. So one of the things that we expressed an acute concern with was the amount of sort of detritus, the amount of just garbage introduced into Lake Mattawanakee associated with the mats. And one of our bigger concerns was actually with the burlap mats and the degradation of those, and where does all this crap go if it breaks down? And maybe the burlap mats aren't that big of a deal because they would presumably at some point biodegrade, although maybe very slowly. But also the plastics, the poly versions of these, if they start to deteriorate, they're in the water, they're in the sun, And so one of my concerns here is that we're adding another variable to this determination of whether or not these are even a good idea for Lake Mattawanakee by increasing the amount of material. And that feeds into our concern about sort of the detritus. The other concern that I think we had was the stability of these. And it's one thing to have a 600 square foot burlap mat where gases can get through. It's a very different thing in my mind to have 2,000 square feet of poly that's just going to accumulate gases underneath. That's more than 3 times as much area, but all of that gas is going to ultimately aggregate in one area and create a pretty significant uplift force. So can you speak to any differences in how a 2,000 foot mat would be managed versus a 600 square foot mat in the context of both materials, detritus, and stability?
Right. So to address your concerns about those, the materials that are not natural, so the plastic, the polyethylene, polypropylene, those are not left in. They are removed at the end of each season. They are looked at. Last time they were all new, so they were all in good shape. They were all examined when they came out, and they were still in, structurally good shape. They had, stuff sort of grown on them or, stuck to them, which was washed off. So they would be, going forward, they'll be reviewed each time before they're put in. And if there's something that would be, that is deteriorated to the point where it might not, stay attached, they wouldn't be used, or the part that is unstable would be removed and not so it's not going into the lake. And the issue about gases is that's clearly an issue, but the mats need a way for the gas to escape, otherwise they just aren't stable. So in my case, I just put down a tarp with sandbags on it, but I had to cut slots in it every 3 feet or so, so that any gases would escape, so that it wouldn't bellow up and be an issue. The ones that are that were also polypropylene but were commercial have sleeves in them every 5 feet, I think, where a rebar is slid in them, and the rebar sits on the bottom, and those are the ones that I said the plastic between them kind of pucker. It's lifted up. It floats. It's lighter, so it floats about an inch or so off the bottom. So any gas that's generated under there just escapes because it's not. It escapes off the side because it's loose enough to the bottom that it doesn't collect there. The burlap mats are, as far as the gas is concerned, they've got a weave, so they're porous and the gas doesn't collect underneath them. Actually, the gas, if the mats are put down early enough in the season before the plants are there, then there's not necessarily much gas generated. It's, when, like I didn't put mine down till the middle of July because of various personal issues, and there were plants there, and so those plants died and they generated gases. But the people who put them down early might not really have much gas. But anyway, the burlap is porous, and any gas generated underneath it would come through. They didn't have experience any problems with those tending to lift up. There were no, they checked them monthly, and there was no degradation from them. They'll continue to check them monthly, this year. They'll check them as soon as the water's warm enough to get in and look at them. Over time, they start to get covered by silt that kind of flows around in the lake on the bottom. And the reason that they are only effective for, say, 3 or 4 years is that they eventually get enough silt on them that they basically aren't, they're not the thing on the top of the bottom anymore. They've got a lake bottom on top of them, and so the plants start to grow on the silt, I believe. And at that point, they become part of the bottom, and I know that there's some concern about them adding to the layer at the bottom, there are two thoughts on that. One is that if they weren't there and there were plants growing there every year, the plants would die and be going down to the bottom and adding their own detritus to the lake bottom and adding to the muck down there. The other possibility is that if they get covered up enough to the point where they're not being effective anymore, is it useful to try to see if they could just be removed at that point? I think they would still have their enough integrity to remove them. They wouldn't have much silt on them. For that matter, we could see if maybe say after 3 years they're just removed, and they might have just a little bit on them, and they might still be more or less effective, but as a proactive measure, maybe we say that they have to be taken out after 3 years if they can be, and so that they proactively aren't adding to the bottom.
A quick question. So who regulates like putting these things in within the lake? Like they're all put on different. They're being put in at different times.
Right.
When they're put in, like you said, like who's inspecting them when they're being put in, and is there some kind of a group that goes around and helps put these things in and looks at them every time they're put in and taken out?
Yeah. So several of us, usually they're not things that you can put in by yourself. It takes 2 or 3 people to put them in. So I've participated in most of them, not all of them. We have requirements for reporting on what happens when they are put in, and then reporting every month in terms of what the conditions are and what the experience is with the mats and what's happening around them. And so we made sure that everybody was reporting what was happening. I went around over the course of summer to look at them. It's hard to, it's not like you can, look at a lawn and say, okay, you did this. The lake is murky. You can't really see more than about 3 feet deep. So even if you are underwater with a mask, it can be sometimes you have to have the right conditions to be able to see, on a sunny morning when things are calm, you can see down to the bottom and you can tell what's happening. Sometimes if you go in and it's not perfect conditions, there's silt that comes up and it's hard to see. We did try to take pictures of what was happening too, which is also variably successful. But that was the process, is that we were documenting, what was happening, and everybody knew what the rules were, and I tried to get to them when they were put in, but that wasn't always possible.
And so what's the Conservation Commission's appetite here with respect to allowing the applicant to go from 600 square feet to up to 2,000 square feet in aggregate or individually?
Can I just remind again that the state's guidelines are they're an appropriate management process for less than 10% of the lake area. And
You can, Dave, but I'm going to push you on that one, and I was going to leave it alone, but I don't necessarily agree with that determination. It's one thing to say 10% of the lake area, but we're focusing on a very specific depth interval here in the photic zone immediately adjacent to the shoreline. And so I have zero appetite in the long run for allowing 10% of the lake that is the shallowest portion right on the shoreline to be covered. So I don't want to.
I hear you.
I don't want to misconstrue or misrepresent what you might expect from the commission, or at least from me, where that's concerned.
Right. Yeah. No, I get you. And I also had the same question about, do they really mean 10% of the whole lake, or 10% of the part of the lake that, is covered with plants? I asked our resident lake management, certified lake management, Bob Hartzell, and he said no. I mean, he had right though that document. He said it is 10% of the whole lake, but I understand what you're saying. Our lake, in the zone where the plants grow, is about half of the lake area. So if we're looking at, and I'm not saying we're trying to get anywhere near 10%, right? So half of our lake is shallow enough to have plants in it, so that you could say 5% in that case, right, of the lake area.
No, in the context of this particular pilot project, I have no concerns. I just want to make sure you understand that at some point that the next benthic match, right? Let's presume that this is successful. I would expect us to have
some limit,
more scrutiny for the next one, rather, and every one we add after that becomes a little more challenging and requires a little more scrutiny.
Yeah.
I don't think it's relevant to this particular question because we're still only looking at 3 or 4 properties along the lake right now, but
7.
Okay.
Yeah, which is
3 or 4 within Littleton that we have jurisdiction over.
Right, 4 in Littleton, right? Yeah, and yeah, I mean, ultimately, we're hoping that coming out of the pilot project, we could potentially have a process where we could sort of set up. Here's a process for residents that want to do this to be able to participate in a program like this without having to go through their own notice of intent and that sort of thing. Hickory Hill Lake has that kind of a program, and I recognize that there would need to be constraints, limits, and such. If some kind of arrangement like that could be, developed, but
let's cross that bridge when we get there. The question in front of us right now is 600 feet or 2,000 square feet.
Right.
Kyle, Carl, Andrew, do you guys have any input on this?
Getting a little nervous on the management of 2,000 square feet of material, to be honest. And I'm kind of questioning your shoreline length and size anyway. Amy just scrolled through that document, and I'm not sure how to scale they were, but the map that you put in seemed to cover a very large area of your waterfront area as it is. I mean, that's probably not true for all 7 properties, but I'm trying to envision you deal with a 40 by 50 benthic mat and keeping it stable year after year.
Well, it's not in for the summer. It's the burlap mats are in, but they are held down every so many feet with a bag of sand, so that they are stable.
Yeah, I mean,
the
you
ones that
basically
are-
already gave us the argument for removing those after 2 years worth. Right? Like I have no appetite for those hanging around on the bottom of the lake for an extended period of time. Especially after even reading through the reports that you have been providing are great. That's the detail of those reports are fantastic. But looking at each one of them, everybody was seeing accumulations of silt already after a season, never mind a year. But again, that's a down the road issue.
And I guess my thought, Kyle, is that if I generally agree with you, I'm a little uncomfortable with 2,000 square feet or something like that, but I'm concerned with us approving 2,000 square feet as part of this pilot project and then getting roped into it in perpetuity. But at the same time, I'm interested to understand how well 2,000 square feet performs, right? Like the scientist in me is like, okay,
Yeah.
so we kind of know 600, like what is
Yeah, the results were great.
Like,
Yeah. Yep.
And some people would put in probably a smaller mat because they don't want to pay for a big mat, or it's easier to put in, and then move it a couple times so that you wouldn't have as much in the water at any one time. But of course, some of them would potentially put in the larger one.
And Dave, are you going to keep track of that for us and include it in the? Let's presume that we allow.
Oh yeah,
2,000
We'll
square
do the
feet.
same kind of reporting we did last year.
Yeah, right. Because those reports showed the square footage that each property installed, correct?
Right. Yeah, and like I said, some people moved them, and I put down. We recorded. What happened when they moved them, where they moved them to, how long they were, in each place, what the conditions were, again, month by month.
My 2 cents here, Kyle, is to let 2,000 square feet go forward as part of the pilot study, as long as the applicants understand that there's nothing about this that compels us to approve 2,000 as a application in perpetuity, right? This is part of us studying and understanding what works. And part of a pilot study is sometimes pushing things to the point of failure.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's a great point, because we're to modify the existing order, right? That will expire eventually. So as you just said, there's no,
Right.
down the road, we figure out the process going forward, but this is basically what a 3-year pilot study. We're watching this over. And so I agree. I'm comfortable modifying it for the extent of this order, seeing the results, because the results of the 600 square feet, I think, were fantastic. And it would do just the understanding that this is not a set it and forget it type thing. Just because you're proving that the 600 square feet working on the 2,000 square feet, if it works, all of the details that you've been going through are going to need to continue, right? This isn't going to stop. The reporting and inspecting and documenting, that's never going to stop after a pilot study showing that 2,000 square feet worked, in my opinion. I guess if other people feel comfortable loosening that, then so be it. But
yeah, I mean, there's an implicit understanding that what we're doing right now is a pilot project, and then we can see what kind of experience we get from that, and what do all of us think makes sense, if anything, going forward. I would also point out that this is one alternative if something like this is not seen to be felt to be appropriate. Then there are other the other alternatives are maybe so hydro raking is one of the other alternatives that some people do, which I would say is they're doing a much larger area than the 2,000 square foot, and they're taking everything off the bottom, all plants, even part of the bottom, and they just dump it on the shore. This to me is much more benign than that, but that gets approved regularly.
Let's
if this wasn't moving forward, more people would probably end up going with that.
Understood. So let's move this forward. Carl, Andrew, do you guys have anything to add here? And
I would just,
go ahead.
oh, I'm sorry. So I would just agree with everything that's been said so far and just allow the 2,000 for now. And we can always scale it down in the future if we have results that aren't in the interests of the lake.
Carl, you okay with that?
I agree.
Amy, do you need a vote to modify the order of conditions, or is
Right,
general
so,
consensus sufficient?
this was not submitted as a formal amended order of conditions, more as a minor modification, so I would just need a vote to approve it as such.
And can we get a vote to approve a minor modification to the order of conditions?
Sure. I'll move that we accept the minor modification to the benthic mat pilot program on Lake Mattawanaki. I don't recall the
Mass DEP file number 2040962.
yes. There it is.
Second.
All right, roll call vote. Chase,
Chase Garvey, aye.
Carl,
Carl Melberg, aye.
Kyle,
Kyle Mansfield, aye.
myself, I. It is unanimous.
Very good.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you very much. Appreciate your help.
Appreciate
And I
it.
understand, everybody's concern. We appreciate your interest and your attention to, we all want the lake to be good too. So, yeah, thank you.
Good luck.
Thanks,
Thanks, Dave. Good night.
Okay, thanks. Bye.
Okay, we still have a few administrative items to handle here. Amy, you want to pick that up for us? I think we're at the Open Space Committee.
Yep, so this is just a short discussion. Having an open space committee has sort of been on your list of priorities for a while. And Mark Rombacher at least is interested in moving that forward with the select board. We both agree that not until after the open space and recreation plan is done, so it wouldn't be, until late fall, basically. But I mostly wanted to see if y'all still thought it was worth pursuing this. I would tend to see it as a committee in particular that would help with some of the land acquisition and thoughts along those lines, as well as some of the other open space stuff.
Could the functions or the proposed functions of this new group maybe be put on the existing open space and recreation plan committee that's working on the updated plan, or is that beyond the scope, you think?
I think they could probably change it if they wanted to. My understanding with the OSRP committee is that it's hard to get, for instance, the rec people together to talk about conservation or conservation to talk about rec, and then you don't have quorum and nothing happens.
That's true. That's a very good point.
Do we have a mission statement or sort of guiding principle associated with the open space, the previously constituted open space committee?
I don't think there ever was an open space committee.
Oh, there wasn't. Okay.
There was just the open space and recreation plan committee.
Okay.
So previously it was actually called the Open Space and Recreation Plan Implementation Committee, but I don't think there was much implementing that went on.
Well, that's a good point too. Well, but then I think that the various committees, if they're going to implement, kind of use the information without anyone digging in their spurs to make it happen.
My 2 cents on this, Amy, is I'd like to defer this until we have a more complete Conservation Commission present. But then at that point, it's one thing for all of us to say, yeah, this is a great idea, but we might all have different conceptions of what the Open Space Committee is supposed to be doing. So I'd rather take this up when we have a more complete Conservation Commission, and then discuss briefly what the scope of the Open Space Committee's role would be, right? Would it be acquisition? Would it be management? Well, like what? It could be a lot of different flavors of that.
Yeah, which
Might
is
make
why I
sense
just-
to invite Mark to that meeting to give us his thoughts and reconcile his thoughts with ours.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's kind of why I just wanted to bring it up so you can start thinking about it. I guess Tim or I can also look for, as you say, mission statements for other towns who have specific open space committees and get an idea of the various way they may work.
Are you guys good with that as sort of homework to think about what an open space committee means to you, kind of thing, and then come back in a couple weeks and we can sort of hash that out?
You want like
And how can I make
2-3
your life
paragraphs?
easier?
I want 6 words in bullet points. That's what I want.
That sounds like a plan.
I agree.
This isn't going to happen fast.
Right.
It'll happen at a municipal pace.
There you go. Then the next thing was just to tell you, there's going to a vernal pool talk on March 20th over at the library in the evening. If anybody wants to sign up for that, you can just let me know.
You're giving
I'll
that
be
talk,
doing a
right?
short thing, and then Scott Smyers from Oxbow will be doing a more on the biology and road crossing stuff.
Amy, would you mind to shoot us an email like the day before that, just as a reminder?
You send me an email the day before to remind you to. Like, oh my God. Yes.
No, you just assign it to Tim. We'll just make it Tim's.
No, I gotta remember to sign it. Well, he'll be listening to this, so that's no problem. And then I think you all have heard this, maybe not. Again, this is just a heads up about a potential land acquisition for Lyle Webster's property. This is Bulkley here and Foster. It's about 36 acres, of which give or take 25 acres are upland. And he's extremely interested in trying to get this protected. But of course, at the same time, he's invested a lot of money in this with his siblings and everything, and trying to get that back. So you may be hearing a bit more about that if you think it's worth exploring. The land grab applications are due, I believe, something like July 1st. They haven't announced the opening of the grant round yet, but I think it probably should be this week that they actually do it. And I've been talking with Mark Rombacher about this also, and potentially going to the select board shortly to measure their interest in it. In the short term, there is a need for an assessment, an appraisal. And I talked to one appraiser and I said, I know this isn't a fair question, but how much? Because he knew nothing about the property. And I think he said something like $4,000 to $6,000. And I'm almost 100% sure the town at least has to contract for that. It can't be Lyle contracting for that. So somewhere.
Yeah, I think our work on Browns would show that, right? It's got to be completely arm's length from the seller. Right. So the town's got to contract the appraiser and all that.
Yeah, so I talked briefly with a woman down at DCR, and she said it absolutely needs to be contracted with the town. A little squishier on who's paying for it, although it is just better not to have the seller involved. It's just cleaner. Lyle may have initially seemed agreeable to paying for it. I was like, I don't think he can.
I mean, I've walked this piece of property. It's an amazing piece of property. It's absolutely phenomenal. We only have so many large tracts of land like this available in town. My concern with it is how well it's going to score in a grant application. And my affection for the property and how well it scores are two very different things right now. But I'd fully support doing everything we can to bring the money about to acquire it. I just don't think we should get our hopes up too high that we're going to find a lot of state support to acquire it.
Which I have kind of mentioned, I said we need an endangered species to put over the top. It would be, especially one of the few town-owned pieces in that part of town.
Mm-hmm. The cultural resources component of it is remarkable.
Yes.
It's absolutely remarkable. But
it could be potential long-eared bat habitat.
I was going to ask bats if that's
which is going to be listed, or which will be a federally listed species pretty soon.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't even consider that.
Yeah.
Lyle's willing for me to go out there and walk and see if some of those areas are vernal pools. They certainly look like could be. Oxbow has agreed maybe to come out and take a walk at the same time to see if they think the turtles may have wandered that far, and I can get their opinion on the bat also. Excuse me when we do it. So, but it did make me think of one other thing. And Andrew, I can't remember how this works with CPC. I know in Acton, I believe what they have done is there's almost two open space buckets. There's the open space bucket for, purchase, but there's a smaller bucket of maybe $10,000 or $15,000 that is just kept at $10,000 or $15,000 every year for something like studies. If you need a 21E, or if you need an appraisal, you need something else for a land purchase, which means that I believe if we need to act quickly and that money is there, it could be used without going to town meeting. It would still need the CPC vote, but it would have already been voted for that use. And I don't know, going forward, if that's something CPC may or may not be interested in setting up.
I think it'd be a great idea just in case there was an emergency, expenditure like this situation here. I know Housing Authority has a very similar system where most of the money that they use for like the Affordable Housing Trust and improvements on site at like Pine Tree Park, that's all allotted at once, and then they just give us a report quarterly as to like what they're spending the money on. So it's already pre-approved.
Right.
Just like this would be pre-approved. But that, I think it's a great idea if we could do that.
And if history's been a indication, it wouldn't be used every year by any means, but at least it's there when, right now we're not going to have time to go to CPC town meeting before we would need the money for the appraisal. So we'd have to come up with the money someplace else.
Yeah, if we could get, like you said, 15,000 pre-approved by town meeting, maybe every spring, and just have it sit there, and if it does get used within that fiscal year, just return it back and rinse and repeat.
Yeah. Well, I assume the other options for paying for the appraisal would either be out of the general fund or possibly out of what I continue to call the Oak Hill Fund, which I think right now has about $200,000 in it.
I mean, I'm not opposed to utilizing the resources that available to the Conservation Commission to do it, but I'd rather exhaust townwide resources before we do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is there much of a rush on this? Like, would we have time to put this through, say, for a CPA application in time for the Springtown meeting this cycle?
The problem is going to be the money for the appraisal, and then we get the appraisal, and then the money for the acquisition, right? Like we're like several cycles away from the acquisition. We could potentially get the appraisal done, but even that puts us behind the eight ball a little bit in terms of timing.
Yeah, I think we want the appraisals hopefully sooner rather than later. And the appraisers are getting in, it's coming up on grant season. When they become even busier for this kind of stuff. So trying to get onto their schedule earlier rather than later is probably a good thing. At least getting RFPs if we're going to go ahead with this whole thing. So I just want to throw it out there and give you guys a heads up. And I agree. It's the more I look at the property, the better I think the chances are. But it is not it depends how competitive everything is.
Mm-hmm. So do you need, in terms of getting the appraisal done, which appears to be sort of the next step,
Yes.
or the next critical path item, do you need anything from the Conservation Commission tonight to begin to move the appraisal forward?
I think maybe at this point, maybe just, especially because there's only 40 here tonight, just, sort of consensus that it's worth going ahead. And I can have discussions with Mark about who's paying for this, how this appraisal is going to get moving. Mark has said that Lyle was coming into the planning board or the select board the 27th, whatever that Monday is, next Monday. And I'm not sure exactly to what end. So that may be kickstarting the discussion from that point of view also. So why don't I, if you all agree, why don't I go ahead and have more conversations with Mark about the appraisal in particular? And I don't mind, it's a good 40 or 80 hours worth of work to put this together. And I don't mind doing that. But there is some other cost. And SVT is theoretically willing to help out, as is the Littleton Conservation Trust, at least in preparing the application. And I would assume that the Sudbury Valley trustees would also probably hold the CR that we would need to have. I'm not sure if there's much money coming from them.
Yeah, but I mean, you know how these things go. The more names we can list supporting this outside of the grant, $1,000 here and $500 there can expand that list pretty quickly. So,
yeah.
I'm supportive of doing whatever we can to move this forward. Any opposition to that?
Second.
Sounds great.
Kyle, Carl, Andrew, to the extent that you guys haven't seen this property, ping me. Happy to set something up for you to take a look at it with Lyle and Mark and so on. It's eye-opening when you get a chance to walk it.
Yeah, that sounds good to me.
You look for a vernal pool while you're out there.
Any bats, any salamanders, any turtles, you just...
Yeah, keep an eye out for a bat. We could use some bats out there. No place else, but... Yes, okay, move on.
Carry on.
So the last thing is the Director of Land Stewardship. That was my mistake. It was not on the agenda when I mentioned that when Erin was there that, oh, by the way, do you want to appoint her? And so that vote is rescinded. And so I guess the discussion is, do you think there should be a town-approved Director of Land Stewardship? Because it used to be just through the Conservation Trust. And then I got to figure out how to do that, because I think it's more than just a vote, whether or not it's an associate position that is also the Director of Land. You know, I think it needs to be more formal. Now that
That's a good point.
To me, it made sense because you do have, Jim or Erin directing work on town property. I'm always involved, but I'm certainly not there in their sort of day-to-day activities, if you will, out there.
Is this going to be a paid position? Is this the
No.
volunteer?
Strictly, as I told Erin, who is the Conservation Trust Director of Stewart, I said it means absolutely no extra work. It just gives you maybe a little more authority. It's strictly volunteer.
Right.
Well, unless you want to pay somebody, that I'm all for. Wait, let me back up.
I would prefer not
If
to.
we could pay somebody, we'd find one more hour that we could officially pay Tim first. I think before anything else.
Are there any benefits to maybe keeping this informal with maybe just trust blessing? And is that maybe more flexible ultimately? Or do you think there are striking advantages to having the person formally appointed by the board?
I don't think there's a huge advantage to having it appointed per se. Everyone is signing waivers. So, that part of liability, if you will, I think is taken care of. So
as long as there's no some sort of internal bickering or saying, who do you think you are telling me what to do type thing, like if that starts to become an issue when people start getting up in arms that so-and-so is telling them what to do because they think they should be, I don't see that that's going to be an issue anytime soon, but that's the simple fix, right? we say, hey, he can. We are officially telling them that this person, this individual, that they're running the show.
I am all for empowering whatever volunteers want to help improve conservation land with whatever we can do to make it efficient.
Well, why don't we let, if it sounds right, just let sleeping dogs lie right now.
Yep.
And if it does become an issue on the radar, I can figure out how to make it a little bit more formal.
Sure.
Makes sense.
Sounds
And I
good.
mostly want to let you know the votes.
So Erin must be happy then.
What?
We kind of backed her into that anyway, didn't we? So she's probably a little relieved.
Who's this?
Was it Aaron, right? Was that?
Oh,
who-
Aaron, yeah. I swear it's not going to be any more work for you.
Yeah, she seemed caught off guard. So
And I know I had something written down on the copy of my agenda at the office, which I left at the office, so, but I can't remember what it is, so we're done,
Good.
I believe.
Anything else from anybody else?
Nope.
Okay. Looks like we're ready for a motion to adjourn then.
So moved. All right, roll call vote. Kyle,
Kyle Maxfield, aye.
Chase,
Hey, guy.
Carl,
Tom Elber guy.
and myself, it is unanimous.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you and
Night,
good night.
everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great night.
Bye.